Please excuse my voice is going out just a little bit, but for the next 15 to 20 minutes, I hope to teach you all what it takes to become a master. And this is going to honestly be through my eyes, coming through UCF, but as applying to master's programs and going through the process, I noticed a lot of the colleges were very similar, so this definitely applies to other colleges within the state of Florida and outside as well. So just a little bit of background about myself. Why am I up here? What makes me a expert to tell you what's going on and what you should be doing? Well, first and foremost, I graduated from UCF twice, as Dr. Teeter said. I started here as my undergraduate and graduated in 2011 with that, and then completed my master's in the summer of 2013. Was actually a little late because UCF has changed a lot since I've been coming to school in the past couple years. And gosh, it is growing so fast. And that's really a good thing for you guys that want to stay here. You're in a new, up-and-coming, and progressing school, which is really, really important. The bottom area of that CV is going to be my academic honors and associated programs. I actually had to cut that off because it is so insanely extensive. And as the previous presenter was talking about, it's important to do a lot of programs, be involved. Yes, having a high number of them can be a little overwhelming for those that are looking at you, but the connections that you make through those programs, I think, are the most important part of them. Being involved in the school, having your face out there, having your name out there, associated with a positive experience is really good. I then stayed within the Teeter Lab throughout my undergraduate, stayed with him through my master's years, was able to be invited to speak at a global conference up in Washington, D.C., which again, outreach, talking to other people, people around the globe with different views and different opinions. Even ethics comes up a little bit when you're talking about things on a global level. So that was really, really interesting and really great for me. This past 2 years, I was then, once I got my master's, hired by Valencia College. If you guys want to take my microbiology class, you can follow me over there. And I have a lot of students that are attending both UCF and Valencia and are either going to be into nursing or into the medical career, or a lot of them do want to get into research as well. And that's really what I'm going to be here today, talking about getting ready for a research career, as I am now, even looking forward to my future as a research scientist. All right, so why become a master? Really, honestly, the aspiration has to be there for you. It has to be a field that you live to pursue. You have to love it. Just as I'm sure the last presenter was talking about, going to medical school is your life. It is, he said 15 hours a day. That is your 100% commitment. And it's the same thing getting into a master's program. You're essentially marrying that lab. It becomes your family. That college is your home. And you really need to be sure that this is exactly what you want, because it is a commitment. I found the master's program fitting for me because of my aspiration to continue my knowledge. I loved college. Getting my bachelor's was great, but I wasn't done yet. And I knew that I wanted something as a stepping stone. I knew I didn't want to go into PhD, which was what Dr. Cheeto will be talking about next. It's a longer commitment that I wasn't completely sure about yet, so I decided to start with my master's, and that seemed like a good stepping stone. Medical was not where I wanted to go either. My cells in the lab can die. It's not a big deal. But if a patient tends to pass, it's a little bit harder, and that wasn't something I knew personally in my life that I could handle on a daily basis, that I wasn't going to be able to, really have that personal connection that a lot of doctors have. I didn't want to go towards that human anatomy. I wanted to look at things on a more micro level, and such. I went into the biomedical sciences master's program here. One of the first things that I say is to also find a professor that interests you, but also empowers you. This is going to be your mentor for possibly the next 2 years. So it needs to be someone that gives you the confidence to pursue that career, pursue that education, and kind of lights that fire underneath you, because it is very, very hard. Next is finding that lab that supports you and educates you. Not only will you be learning in class in our what we call core classes, but you are also spending a huge majority of time in the lab. And it's as a rotation, kind of as you would see in medical school. But you get to stick to one group for 2 years. The best thing about that is, again, those people become your family, but you have a high number of people that are going to teach you. We had people that in my lab that were very proficient in physics, another woman that was amazing in chemistry. So there are all different people in that lab that you, if so be, can pull information from. It's like having your own teacher for each of these courses within your lab each and every day. One thing that I say in the beginning is to ask everyone everything. Don't think you're talking too much. Maybe I do. But honestly, getting that information is essential. And the fact that you guys are here today is definitely a jump start for you. And as I said, ask. Please feel free to ask questions. And be organized and write it down. Starting as your undergraduate, you get moving, you start thinking maybe your sophomore, junior year about going to grad school. Keep notes. Just like you have a biology book or a microbiology binder that you have everything in, get together a grad school binder. Pull all that information, flyers you find out about throughout the year. Maybe a college sparks your interest. There's a story on the internet about they're doing XYZ research that really interests you. Print it out, stick it in that file. Maybe in the future you'll contact that research scientist and maybe look into that college. It's really important to be organized because it can get really, really hectic as we go on. The next thing you want to do is weigh the pros and cons. As I said, you want to find a field, whether it be science or engineering or math or physics, that really, really inspires you. And then weigh the pros and cons. In truth, in reality, we have to make sure there's a job market. You have to make sure that there are positions open. You have to make sure that there's a college that teaches this. So weigh the pros and cons of all of your decisions, and that helps you, again, becoming organized. Lastly, make that choice for you. Don't make it for anyone else. It has to be your personal decision. You are going to be going on this ride for the next 2 years, and it has to be something that you are very, very confident in. All right. Next is the commitment. So now you've decided. It's in your heart. You want to do it. You're going to give it your all. Get ready. You have a 2 to 3-ish year devotion to that college. I write 3-ish. It can take longer than 2 years. Yes, the courses and the program does delineate this happens during this semester, then you move on to this. You have deadlines and milestones. But truth be told, science doesn't always work out the way you think it is. 99% of what we do in the lab is complete and utter failure. And it's that 1% that gets papers published, that gets your name out there, that gives you the recognition that it takes to really graduate with your master's. So it's all up to the science. This isn't exactly a course load that you complete in a certain amount of time. As I said, this is going to be your home away from home, so make sure you pick a college that feels right for you. Next, you have your class courses and your lab time required. As I said, and you guys saw in that last presentation, there are a very nice flow of classes that we'll talk about. But you also have to think about what your lab is going to require of you. Does your boss expect you to be there from 9 to 5? Does your boss expect you to be there from 5 p.m. till 4 in the morning? What does this class require of you, and what does your labs require of you to make sure that you are, again, being organized and being efficient? The next thing you're going to see for a lot of the science programs is that you will be getting a stipend, which is awesome. UCF, $20,000. Oh my gosh, that's incredible. But a stipend is a fancy word for your salary, because for your degree, this will be your full-time job. Many colleges do not allow you to have jobs outside of your master's commitment. And honestly, there's no time for it. So that stipend is going to be your living salary for those next possible 2 years. But I do have to say on top of that, though, is that there are a ton of fellowships, different programs, grants, and so on that can also help you out with that financial burden possibly that you could experience over those 2 years. So again, getting started in your undergraduate. I was lucky enough to receive a RAMP fellowship as an undergraduate, the Research and Mentoring Program here at UCF. And that continued as an offer as a fellowship for my master's through UCF. And that actually did make quite a little bit of my decision for staying here. I was gifted an amazing advantage of being here. So that's really, really important. The next one is make the decision and get to work yesterday. As I said, you really need to be on top of these things. So once you make that decision, start getting everything together. The next bullet point of apply shows you everything you need to get together for just one application, and all of them really do vary. Each application being a little bit different, but many of them being super specific. They're going to want certain fonts. They're going to want certain things and titles in certain places. Many different schools ask for these things in different formats, whether they have a CV versus a resume, whether that has a page requirement or not. Some want cover letters that talk about this. Some of them want a sample of writing talking about ethics, a sample of writing talking about what would happen in a certain situation through your grad school. So this is something that takes a lot of investigation within that college. And honestly, it changes every year. I graduated 2 years ago, and I'm sure UCF has changed some of its little itty-bitty specializations and personalized their application. Another one that you're going to want to look at a little bit earlier than you think is the official transcript. That might seem easy, but to be realistic, it takes about 2 weeks to mail. You have to get it from the registrar's office. It has to be official, signed, and sealed. And a lot of these things that you think might just be able to get picked up cost money and take time for you to receive them and send them off. So make sure, as I said, that you get to work on these sooner than later. The last one here is the most important, I think, in starting now, is these letters of recommendation. As I said earlier, you need to be involved at this school so that you can make your imprint. I have 300 students per semester over at Valencia, and I'd say about 6 of them, for this semester, know their names, and they've made that impact on me. The rest of them will be in and out, and that's their choice. You can be in the back row, and you can just get your A and fly through, or you can make an impact and, in the future, ask for a letter of recommendation. Again, each college is going to be different. Some ask for 1. I know UCF asks for 3, as well as more specifics here. Some of them are going to ask for people only in the field that you're applying for. Some are going to ask for one person that is outside of the field, but still within the college. I've even seen applications where they ask for a personal recommendation letter. So someone from your life, whether it be a family member or other ones are people that you've worked with. They may ask for a work letter recommendation. So very, very specific some of these applications can be. So make sure that you look into this sooner than later. The way I did this throughout my undergraduate was having a calendar. The big board calendars by month, they pretty much take up my whole office table. And that really helped me flipping month to month. I could see my year, my breakdown of my year. You know, worst case scenario, if I flipped the page, something was coming up in a month. So it wasn't, too far off that I had to freak out at any given time. But having that calendar, having all those different dates, deadlines, is really important to committing to the program. So now you've gotten in, congratulations. What is the program? Well, at UCF, we have first and foremost, for your first year, what we call core. In fall, you have core 1. In spring, you have core 2. Okay, so what's core? Well, it's actually not like the medical school. Instead, it's an amazing class in which we have the professors at UCF come in and talk to us about their specialty. This is actually really fun, except for the fact that it's at 7 a.m., because they want us to start working at 9 in the lab, because you have people like Dr. Teeter, you have Ratna Chakrabarty, you have some of the most, I think, some of the smartest people I will probably ever meet in my life, teach you for a week. And they just unload their entire expertise on you. And I find that to be very inspiring. The fact that I was able to, at UCF, have some of the top-notch researchers tell me about what they're doing. That's Bossy Wetzel talking about metabolic diseases and disorders. It's not as organized, I would say, as the medical school does by body system and things along that line, but we cover a really nice, broad amount of information concerning all of the different microbiology series, and they get the most expert people in the college to teach you about those things. So core is really great for that, but you still have tests and quizzes and all the things that come along with that regular class. Another thing you're going to have to go through within the program is safety and certification. If you've had research experience at UCF before, maybe you already are certified or have your safety certificates, but each and every year you'll have to get recertified or do some online refreshers, and that's something that is really important to the program as well and getting into your research. And that's usually the first summer that you come into the college so that you can get that certification right away and get to work. You also have an ethics and a lab course. The ethics course talks about plagiarism, talks about how to write scientifically and not have things sound opinionated. And then the lab course that you also take is going to be some hands-on lab experience. Because I already was at UCF and had 2 years of experience in the lab, they actually ex-nayed me on that, and I got out of doing that. Another thing that if you are very advanced in your undergraduate, you can take graduate courses at UCF, or graduate level courses, 5,000 level courses, as an undergraduate. Get on it. It's a great way to get out of doing those classes too. Dr. Teeter had me in the lab a lot more because I got out of taking the lab course and one of my elective courses because I had taken immunology at a master's level 5,000 course as an undergraduate. And you guys are all free to do that too. Those courses can move to other schools as well. I have a friend who's up at UF doing his master's there, and they are accepting his immunology course from UCF as well. So he's got a little bit of jump on things, as amazing as that is. So as I said, get started on these things yesterday. You can kind of jump the gun on some of these things. For those years of the program, it's really, this is my lineage of go to class, then go to lab, then you study. And the last two of those are really optional if you have time and your course allows. As you're going through the program, this is something I've learned kind of during my end of my program, to update what you've been up to. Keep that CV going. Keep that resume going. The same one that you have been using for getting to the master's program, keep it up. You'll be honestly forgetful of some of the things you do. The minute I get home from this, I'm going to be adding this to my CV because for me, it's something I did over a couple hours. Maybe I forget about it in a couple months, but truly, it is another experience and shows that you can talk in front of a class of individuals, that you can speak on a past experience, things along that nature. And when I got my education job with Valencia, they saw that I had spoken at high schools, that I had spoken at colleges, and I think that was a little bit of the edge that I had for that. During the program, you're going to have a huge amount of deadlines and milestones. This is something within UCF that there was a little bit of flexibility on. They knew we were all super busy. with lab and with class and things of that nature. But try and stay on top of it, because as fast as they come out of your head, other people can forget about them too. And before you know it, you're far past, and maybe they only have it open so long. So make sure that you really stay on top of these things. First and foremost, you're going to pick your committee. You will have 3 people that will follow you throughout your entire program, determining at the end if you are now a true master of the field. Each and every year, we have a meeting where you update them on your research, update them on where you plan to see this research go. And then finally, at the end, you bring them your thesis, they read that, and hopefully you get that final signature of approval, then in which you will defend that thesis in front of them, present it in front of them as well as peers that are invited to that defense. And they really do put the final say on that. While picking this committee, be kind of picky. Try and find people that understand your field. You don't want to be at your committee meetings and having to explain something terribly in depth, or having someone that's really not understanding what you're talking about fully. Try and get people that you think you can steer towards your idea, your research project. And that's really important for making things easier for you and for them. You're also going to have a thesis draft, as I said, that is due. This is going to be one of the deadlines and milestones that comes up on you much faster than you think it is. My thesis only ended up being, I think, 62 pages long, so not super, super long. But when it comes to putting it together in the proper format with the proper text and images in the right place, citations, which you need to keep up on, this thesis draft can be a little harder than expected. As I said, with your notebook that you might have with getting everything ready, you're also going to want to keep a notebook of your lab materials that you'll keep in lab, but also one that I kept at home was all the papers that I was reading concerning my research. Every paper that I read, highlighted and starred and circled, I kept in a notebook. And that helped writing my thesis move much easier. I had all my citations. I had all my information right in front of me. And that also made my defense a lot easier as well, because by that time, after doing this research for 2 years, after living it, defending it, it's kind of like defending your own honor. You're kind of up there and you believe it wholeheartedly. So the defense can be kind of the downslope of that. I'm actually a little bit more easy up on stage. I find it okay to talk, but if you are maybe a little shy, the defense, you might need more practice along that. But always remember your committee, your PI, your lab mates, your friends. Practice in front of them. Constantly keep those people up to date with what you're doing. Your lab is not gone now. You're now a part of this lab, and those people are always going to be there for you. The last check mark that I have down here is be known. During the program, it's good, as I said, to be known. Go to social events. Talk to people about what you're doing. Those people that you are staying in contact with when you graduate might have a job opening somewhere. They might know that mid-sci, the company needs someone to do quality analysis. They might know someone who works at Sanofi Pasteur and they need someone to help prep animal studies. I honestly think a lot of the experience is being known, but make sure you're being known in a good way. You don't want to be the girl that's always late. You don't want to be the person that's hard to work with in a lab. You don't want to be the super opinionated kid that, sits in the front row and, berates the professor. You want to be a nice, well-rounded, easy person to work with, easy person to hire, easy person to have around, so that once you finish your program, you can move on towards that career. So since then, I've always said what you look after during your experience is what will lead you on. As I said, kind of the plants that you tend to will grow. So having close relationships, knowing people, being connected, leading on good impressions is really, really important to moving from your master's. Get ready for another commitment. You're going to, within a job, have to sign another contract. So make sure still that this is where you want to be. How the master's program went was really what you wanted to get out of it. And then find the job, fit that mold, and possibly there is the point of rejection. Many jobs nowadays, because the job market is so tough, they're looking for someone that fits this exact mold. Maybe they're looking for a microbiologist that knows HPLC, or that knows how to do this specific assay or this specific experiment, or work with this specific type of cells. So don't be afraid of rejection. You have many, many jobs that will be opportune to you. Getting a master's, and the reason why I got a master's is because I felt it was the most kind of open-ended position. Getting a PhD, you're moving towards PI, running the lab, being very, very influential in all of the decisions, possibly writing grants, writing papers. For me, I like bench work. I like being in the lab with the radio on, in the hood working with cells, pipettes, and that whole thing is really where I like to be. So that's why I felt the master's fit for me. It's a nice in-between of being kind of a technician and going to a tech school versus having a huge amount of responsibility like Dr. Teeter has. So that's why I felt the master's fit in best for me. So the path to the future for you guys is making these decisions, going through this process. For me, I'm now getting really to this last slide here. But if you guys have any questions, any concerns as you go on through this process, as I said, I'm at Valencia and I have students constantly asking, do you know any hospitals that are looking for nurse technicians? I just finished nursing school. Do you have any time to write me a letter of recommendation? And I'll look that student back up, look at their picture, because we have those type of logs, and say either yes or no. So constantly, even for this, staying up to date, consistent, reaching out, feel free through my email, to make these things known, get your questions answered, make yourself known, is really the best, I think, for moving through this degree. Is there any questions? Sorry, I'm like... Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So definitely first and foremost is learning the most about the professor. And actually I just did this for a job as well. Applying for a job, looking into a professor, do a lot of research on that professor. UCF has an amazing website where we have all the professors, their contact information, their research experience, where they went to school, as well as papers they've recently published. And I think for that, we're humans, and we just want to talk too. So read a couple of their papers and maybe contact them, hey, I'm really interested in your research. I'm currently in Florida at UCF, but I'm very interested in your research at UF or at Valencia. I've really been looking into amyloid beta plaques, and I think that's really awesome. And even before you apply, have that connection with that PI. A lot of times they can kind of, I don't want to say override you, but give you that extra boost in when the college is looking at your GPA and they're saying, okay, she got this score on her GRE and this on her GPA, and we're not so sure. But the professor wants you, and the professor says, I want this student in my lab. I've sat with them, they sent me emails, and then they drove up to UF, and now we sat and talked, and I really like them. They're part of that college. They, I think, get a little bit of pull on that decision. with who they're going to have personally in their lab. So I definitely think reaching out to them on a personal level, even if you're not physically available to see them, try and say, spring break's coming up, and I'd love to come visit your lab, see what you guys do, if you can fit me in, something like that. Showing them that you are going to give the extra effort and extra time to them specifically, I think is really important in making that connection, even if you didn't get to sit in their class for a semester. Because that's more than, like I said, a lot of my students, in and out, they get the A, that's it. If you just sitting down and having, maybe a one-on-one conversation with them is more than maybe a lot of their students might do. Okay. My master's program I think we had 16. It's very small for the master's, and I want to say even 5 of those may have been PhD students. I'm sure all that information for the nitty-gritty is online, but it's pretty small. For what it is at UCF, each lab has to be able to take one of these students, or possibly 2 of these students. So there has to be room for you. And that's why I'm talking about, or saying earlier, about getting that connection, because you can take that room. Instead of applying and having to find a place for you to go as a master's student and having to find a lab after the college accepts you, you can find the lab and then kind of conjunctively at the same time have the college accepting you. But yeah, they're definitely smaller than, I think, the PhD program, even the smallest. So core is your only class that you're going to take, and that's only the first year. And then you're going to have 2 electives. It's really not very class heavy. A majority of your time, like I said, core is from 7 to 9, and then from then on, you're pretty much expected to get lab work done. You're supposed to be in lab, and then usually while my assays are running, if they were like a 2-hour experiment, I'd be studying during that time. So you really need to, time management is a lot of it. But it's not a lot of coursework. It's definitely lighter. And yeah, lab here, where it says class and lab, this isn't like a lab that you go to. It's not microbiology lab. It's your time in your research position working on your lab work. So master's program, definitely different than bachelor's in the fact that it's not classes all day. It's not, morning class, then you've got a break, and then you go to night class. You have your early morning 7 to 9 class, and then possibly one semester you'll have an ethics course, which I think for us was like Mondays from 1 to 2, and then possibly your lab course, again, maybe like Fridays from 3 to 5. Very, very low on kind of the course workload, but very, very heavy if you want to get out in 2 years on the amount of lab work that you're doing. So thesis versus non-thesis, you're going to see colleges are variable on what they require. I mean, I'm sure even other colleges don't have core and that type of thing, and the elective requirements that we have here of only 2. But you have other classes that are independent research and this and that. But what was I'm trying to remember your question. Yeah. But yeah, they're still classified as like a course, independent research. If you're doing non-thesis, they're going to have you take capstone courses, I think is what it's called, where instead of being in a research lab, you are required to be studying a new novel method maybe. And then you do your capstone project, your final paper-esque thing on the research that you've been reading. Whereas with thesis, you're doing the research and writing your own thesis, whereas capstone's more reading other papers and pulling together your new idea from someone else's research. So yeah, I didn't even think about doing thesis versus non-thesis. I was thesis, so that's why you have the defense and your thesis draft and these type of things. But still, it's a lot of independent work. It's not a lot of FaceTime, class time, that type of thing. It's more lab studying or reading papers and such of that nature. Oh, didn't even know that. Also, Dr. Teeter jokes that I am the queen of getting the most bang for your buck. So, as I said, if you have any questions about those type of things, getting the most from that college experience, even as an undergraduate, apply to all the programs. Don't worry if you get rejected. It's just like I said, the job, fitting the mold. Just apply. Just try. If you get it, great. If you don't, And then if you get it and you don't want it, let's say you applied to UF, and then you realize, you got into UCF, or that's not what you feel like after, a year it almost takes to get through this whole process. That's okay too. You can say no thanks. So remember, none of these things are, finalized until you give that commitment back. So apply to more than one place. Get the feel for what deadlines and milestones one college has versus another, what one college requires versus another, what the stipend is at one college versus another can be kind of a degree of decision making. Both. So me and the last presenter, we did have kind of the fact that we went to UCF previously made it more easy for our transition. But I know tons of other students that have not been in a program because they didn't go to that school for their undergraduate and move on to different schools and do just as well, excel even more. So a lot of the programs are for that connection, knowing the people. But you can do that without them or on your own time, and then earn that kind of commitment, earn the respect, earn all that position once you get there and can kind of establish yourself. I know you can get into research programs and master's degrees without having an undergraduate in that specific field. So maybe you were a physics, you got your bachelor's in a more physics-heavy type of field, or even math or engineering, and all of a sudden you decide science is where you want to be. That's totally fine too. One of our best students, Chris, he was great. He was more computer and tech savvy than anyone really in our lab, and he wanted to get into that in his PhD, but he liked the lab atmosphere of hands-on research and was trying to kind of bring those two things together. So you can definitely be outside the field, and sometimes that's even helpful. You bring something different to the table. The fact that you are more computer inclined, or you know how to write code, or you know how to use these specific programs can be really, really helpful to a lab as well. So just because you maybe don't have lab bench research, and you haven't, worked with test tubes and lab gloves, and you haven't put the code on yet, you still have something to bring to the table. And I think that's a lot what applying maybe even in your cover letter you can write about. This is what I bring to the table. Yeah, my transcript doesn't look the best because I was really heavy in physics, but I'm trying to do biophysical analysis. And so that's what I bring to this lab. I've noticed the cover letter for a lot of schools, people use that as their place of kind of talking about possibly an issue that you had. Why my GRE score was low, I kind of talked about there. GRE that you're going to take to get your master's, which is a little bit different, and I put that here, I should have talked about that, is going to be on English, math and writing. Yeah, that's kind of hard. Going to medical school is great because they give you the MCAT, and that's on physics and chemistry and everything you've been studying for the past 4 years. Well, the GRE is a little bit different in that it's going to test you on something that possibly you haven't taken since high school. So the GRE can be hard. It was hard for me. And I talked about that kind of in my cover letter and tried to play to my other strengths because that was my weakness. So playing yourself up in certain areas when it comes to this application and maybe not talking about some other things and then talking about something that you want to defend yourself on. This really is the application to the master's programs and the medical school programs as well. It's really selling yourself. Why me? Why should you guys have me? Why do you need me? So that's really, really important for the process. Anything else? All right. Thanks very much.